don't copy the same playbook that everyone else is doing. Hiring a GTM engineer is not gonna save your business. Whenever an issue comes up, there could only be two reasons. It's either a process issue or is it a people issue.
The Next Gen Sales Leaders Podcast. Coffees for Closers.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Next Gen Sales Leader Podcast. I'm Ben Reed here, and I am with Wesley Hoang, who is the founder of Cymate. It is a top-tier lead generation outbound agency. He's one of the best in the businesses, and so I'm glad to speak with him today. Welcome back to the show.
Well, I appreciate the intro. Honored to be in one of the episodes. I think I watched a couple of your videos, actually recently and in the past too. So kind of great to just be here with you today. So thanks again for having me.
Cool. So I am really excited to talk about agency growth with you because it's been a big topic for me. I think that many of my students and even clients at Reviops, my software company, are all GTM agencies, and many of them are new. They're new to the space. They have less than 10 clients. And I know that you've been successful at building a multimillion-dollar agency. I think you said you have something over 40 clients, and you are crushing by agency standards. Being in that range puts you in what I would call a top-tier agency. So there's a lot to learn from you, and you've obviously figured out something. So I think it'd be a good place to start. I saw a post from one of your, I don't know if it was your employees or your colleagues, where he said that one of the reasons you've been able to succeed so well is that you were a former, I think, software engineer or product manager. I'd like to hear that story, and I'd like to understand like how you think about systems and team and growing a business, because I know that's a focus of yours.
Yeah. No, I was actually a software engineer. The story was I was a software engineer, and then I was bouncing around different companies, working at FAANG too. So Apple, Twitter, most recently Cisco before I quit the 9 to 5 life to kind of all into the agency. So yeah, I had a lot of the engineering background before I start off the agency and things like that. And I guess the good thing from that is it allows me to sort of like deep dive into the automation aspect of it, right? It allows me to deep dive into like the system, the quality assurance, all that kind of stuff. So I was basically able to brought a lot of that into the agency on like the way that we operate, and happy to like share most of like that like in today's episode. But yeah, pretty fun being an engineer. Now just being a founder.
Yeah, so I would say it's an abnormal career trajectory, not in a bad way, but in the fact that most agency owners that I talk to are actually sales guys who found Clay and then decided they have this newfound kind of productized tech ability that they didn't have before with like low code tools like NAN plus Lovable and Clay and Instantly and all these different tools. And then they go, wow, I can actually productize this service offering and I want to go into it. Whereas you came from the other side of the world, which is the product side, which I honestly think is a better skill set to have to run an agency because of the exact reason you just described. Because one thing I say to all of my students and my clients is the number one thing that actually constrains agency growth is operations. It's not actually selling. And so, yes, you have to be able to sell, but selling agency services on lead gen is kind of like selling, candy to children. It's like, it's giving a dog treat to a dog. It's like everyone needs it. So I'm curious, as a engineer who thinks in terms of systems, how did you make sure that never was a constraint for you as you grew up as an agency, or did you not? Or I'm curious in that evolution. This is a break in the podcast to bring you our sponsor, Reviops.com. That is REVYOPS.com, the #1 GTM data management platform for your GTM and revenue operations data on planet Earth. If you are using the modern stack of Clay and Instantly and Email Bison and RB2B and Trigify and all these various tools scattered across the wind, we unify all that data all into one place so you don't have any duplicates, a unified view of every single contact so you can see all the data and all the daily activities across all the platforms all in one place. It will allow you and your team to move faster, to get better attribution across the entire funnel, and to make a heck of a lot more money. Go to reviops.com, check out how you can get started today with me on a call where we'll learn about your data management problems and how we can get you guys to the next level of growth. See you guys at reviops.com. Go there now. It will be in the show notes as well down below. Let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah. Now it is kind of like a backwards sort of like route that most people take. Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. Most agency owners, they start with some sort of like sales experience, and then along the way they learn operations, and this is where they get like hands-on experience when it comes to like NAN, tech automations, and things like that. But for me, I actually had a startup with one of my buddy in 2021. We basically exited it, but during that like period, I had to of course learn a lot about like sales and just marketing and just like positioning, copywriting, and things like that, right? So I did get a chance to expose to like sales and all kind of things. And I think like throughout my agency career, throughout running the agency Cymate as we know now, well, backstory, funny enough, Cymate was actually a QA automation agency when we first started. So we were doing
For dev.
QA for dev. Yeah, exactly. So
Why don't you let everyone know, what does that even mean? Because I think a lot of people don't have no clue.
Yeah. So with development cycle, obviously we like you write your code, like make sure it's working fine, and then you have to go through what we call like a QA process. A lot of the time people are stuck in like the manual QA, like they just click a button to make sure that it works, like you go do a lot of stuff, right? So QA automation, essentially like software engineers, they would go out there and they would build out like the tools, the automations to actually do the test itself, so that way you don't have to do anything manually, right? This is very different than like NAN and then make.com automation. This is actually like Python and things like all that kind of stuff. But yeah,
And before you go forward on that,
yeah.
I want to circle back at some point later in the episode on your take on low code, kind of vibe coding software, because you have the perspective of an engineer, and obviously you see there's this whole new world. I have obviously some strong opinions for anybody who watches me on vibe coding, but I'm curious about your unbiased view on what you think it is. So let's put that, I'm going to write that down, but let's put a pin in that, but keep going.
Okay, sounds good. But yeah, so essentially when we started Cymate, we were a QA automation agency. So we know that a lot of startups in the space, they don't really have like a good QA system, and just being able to like build my own like product, my own company, softwares as a whole, I know that QA is one of the biggest bottleneck when you release a product and it's just like tons of bugs. It's not a fun time for everybody. All right. So yeah, we work with a couple of startups in the beginning to help them implement some kind of like QA automation for them. Now, the issue that we were running into is, number one, most startup that we work with, they actually don't care about QA that much. So we have to do a lot of convincing, right? Like, hey, come on, like you need it because your customer's gonna be unhappy. We're gonna help you save tons of time. I think most startups actually care most about just like getting their product out there to the market to gauge like any interested, get leads coming in along the way, right? So I think just kind of thought to myself back then, like why not pivoting Cymate to become like a lead generation agency? Essentially, we would learn how to do like marketing. We would learn how to do cold email, cold outreach for ourselves to grow the company, but we would also apply that kind of best practices to like the client system as well, right? Kind of like a two bird in one stone, right? So thought to myself, why not? So that's when we pivot Cymate into where we are nowadays, becoming like a go-to-market agency in the space.
Wow, that is such a radical difference. And so, can you dig deeper into that? So you were at a point where you had a certain number of startups, quality assurance startups, and they were apparently telling you, hey, like, I assume they were churning and they weren't finding as much value as they want because of your point, is that like they're less focused on stability and more focused on growth.
Yeah.
So what was like emotionally going on for you and your business partners at that time? Was there ever a fear of like, shoot, maybe we need to just go back to FAANG and just get a job again? Or like, was it like, was the pivot into lead generation kind of like a last ditch effort? How did that evolve?
Yeah. So To be honest, at that point, we only had two customers really. Most of the feedbacks that we were getting from are actually from like founders in the network who are actually like in like well, we call it discovery calls with me back then. And at that time, I think it was just me running the agency. And I don't tell my past employees, but at that time, I was running the business as I was doing the full time too. So that was able to, like levy a lot of the pressure on my shoulder that, hey, we have to bring in revenues, to survive and things like that. So just to have that kind of like cushion was good back then. Um, but I think as I was growing, like as I was sort of like building the QA automation agency back then, one biggest bottleneck that I was running into is the how to build like the processes and the system around fulfillment, right? Because every startup has their own product. Every startup write the software code differently, so it's not like the same playbook that you can replicate to everybody. You would have to like build out the automation from scratch for everybody, right? Um, and I think I sort of very obsessed with system as a business owner. So I love watching, like podcasts on like CEOs on how they run multiple companies and how they make it work and how they're able to like have time to spend with their family and just doing fun stuff. And one thing that they always say that kind of stuck to me is, like they are very focused on the system itself, right? So back then, it was very difficult for me to build out like a system around QA automation as a service. And I think that was the aha moment where it's like, hey, you know what? Why don't we pivot into sort of like lead generation, right? Help me build top of the funnel, help customer coming in, and the fulfillment itself is almost exactly as I was doing it for myself.
And
Yeah.
what do you see in terms of building out that fulfillment? Because I can say for my agency, Next Gen Sales Systems, that was the hardest part, was finding out like how do you onboard a client? What is the first step you take? What is the checklist of things they need to go through before they're ready for a campaign? Before you launch every campaign, let's say you're doing like cold email or even LinkedIn, there's a certain things that we check. We have a 50-point checklist before we go live on each campaign. So
Yeah.
there's like kind of a crazy OCD level of quality assurance, to your point, because one stupid setting or button or thing can like screw up the whole campaign.
Yeah.
And we were noticing in the early stages of our go to market for clients is that we were making stupid mistakes. And it's not because I was making the stupid mistake, it's because I hired somebody who was, relatively speaking, lower paid. They didn't care enough to do the due diligence that I was constantly doing when I ran the campaigns myself. So the
Yeah.
further the client got away from me, the more the quality suffered. And so I needed a way to quality assure somebody who was kind of I'd say, less engaged employee that
Yeah.
was caring, but not caring as much as I did. And that's where I came up with the checklist. So I'm curious, like, how did you think about that? And what kind of processes and systems did you put in place?
I think that's a great question that actually not many agency think about. So let's sort of like let's take a step back and then I'll kind of tell you like the way that we run things inside Cymate. But yeah, like I think to me the one thing that if you're starting an agency and you hire too quickly and you fail, it's probably because of that reason. So for me, my rule of thumb is when I hire somebody, I need to know exactly what the heck I'm doing. I need to be able to build the system myself first before I hire somebody to run that system for me. If that makes sense. I would not hire anybody who, like for like a new role that there's no system or like processes around, right? So if you're starting off your agency in the early stage, I would say at the beginning, you just gotta do it yourself, right? You just gotta know like what is the best practices. You just gotta know what the heck cold email is, best practices, what is the sweet spot, domains, inboxes, infrastructures, and things like that, right? Before you hire somebody, because if not, then it's not gonna work for you. But to answer your question, I think there was two key questions you asked me. So the first one is how do you build that kind of like fulfillment slash onboarding system, right? And the second one is like how to make sure we have some kind of like quality assurance, make sure that as you scale, the quality doesn't drop, right? And that was literally one of the biggest challenges for most agency when they scale. So let me break down that two question for you. the first one, really, when it comes to speaking directly to cold email, there are only really like 3 to 4 pillars that you need to, like watch out for when it comes to onboarding, right? So there's like infra setup, there's like copywriting, there's like lead list building, and there's like campaign management, right? Um, so the way that I like to think about system is I like to break that down into like different like phases, right? Different stages. And then for each stage, like the pillars that I was talking about, I would then start breaking it down to like step by step by step by step, right? Almost like a checklist that you were mentioning, right? And then what I would do is I would almost like a game where you're just like shifting things around. If this doesn't work, then you just remove it. If it does work, then we want to double down on it, that kind of stuff. So almost having some sort of like feedback loops around it to improve the system as we go. And once you have something that is working, I think that's a clear indication that you should start scaling, right? Just take that system and run away with it. Now, the tricky part is how to make sure when you hire somebody, they would actually do as great of a work as you are when you're doing it yourself, right? And we follow this practice in the agency called 10-80-10 rule by Dan Mattel. Have you ever heard of it? Just
It's
curious.
called the 10. I'm a big fan of Dan Martell. In
Yeah.
fact, what's funny is I have his
Oh
book
yeah.
right here. But it was called the 10-80-10 rule. I
Yeah.
know the
10-80-10.
1-3-1, but tell me the 10-80-10.
Yeah, so 10-80-10 rule is the delegation rule that we have in our agency for our leadership team. So basically, when you delegate a task to somebody, you spend the first 10% of the beginning, sort of like break down the project, what is the expectations, making sure that you walk them through how to do it. That person will go out there and execute 80% of the time, and then they would bring back the project for you for like a final approval, which is the last 10%, right? So I think that when it comes to delegation, what most agency owner that I see, what they do is they just tell someone to like, hey, go out there, here's the clients, write the copy, here's documentation, and good luck, have fun,
Mm-hmm.
right? And usually the go-to-market engineer, like the CSM, they was just like, oh, what the heck, I'm just gonna do things my way, and then it doesn't match with like your expectations, and then you just get all angry. So for us, number one, we make sure that we have like good system in place, right? Aside from like the creative aspect, we want to make sure everything else is systemized. We would have people comes in, perform that task for us, and then at the very last, we would like double checking their work and making sure that everything is done correctly, like up to our standard, the way that we want it to be. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
I also like, since we're on the Dan Martell kick, I like the 1-3-1 rule, which is he has a saying of when his employees come to him, he acts like a 5-year-old in the sense that he's like, I don't know. But the reason that he can do that is because he's this deep playbook. Now, what's interesting is I actually have a playbook on how to create playbooks. I have a whole training in Notion, and it's
Yeah.
predicated on his 4 Cs, which is the 4 Cs playbook model he comes up with. And
Yeah.
one is camcorder. He has people essentially
That's
film
right.
the thing that you're doing 3 times, take the transcript. I then throw it into GPT, which uses his whole lesson on the 4 Cs. And then it
Yeah.
spits out the steps, so the step by
Yep.
step thing you need to do. Then it gives you the cadence, which is how often does it have to happen, and the frequency. And then finally, there's a checklist, which
Checklist.
is the
Yeah.
fourth C, which is like everything that has to be true for it to be completed. And the whole idea, for anyone listening, is like you don't want to create such a detailed checklist that it's like NASA level, like space exploration where just nothing gets
Yeah.
done. So it assumes that you're working with people that are relatively competent and can kind of fill in the gaps if there are gaps.
Yeah.
But I learned this from Ryan Dice, the old digital marketer guy back in the day. And his whole thing was refine the process until nobody is asking questions anymore. And so basically, if
Yeah.
you like watch somebody do it, so my whole thing is like produce. So I have a whole framework. He has a different framework, Dan, but I built on top of it, and I call it PPTP. And so it's puppy, process, training, people. And the reason I use that is if you don't know what the process is and you don't know what to do, you can never hold somebody accountable to it because you don't even know it yourself.
Yeah.
So the only way to get out of that space is to become a puppy. And the reason I use puppy is because puppy is like a little innocent creature that wants to go explore the world and wants to sniff and chew on things that shouldn't do it and will get in trouble. And I think people who are getting into the process playbook world of like, I got to create systems, they go too deep into it and they overcompensate and they don't let themselves to be free without documenting everything before they know what it is. So for me, the mental framework is like, before you try to create a process, just try to figure stuff out rapidly by yourself. And then finally, you're going to start to realize what's working. Then the next step for me is so puppy, then process, then put in step by step what you think is the best version. And this is where I really like Elon Musk's 5-step process algorithm. I pulled it up here while you were speaking. The first one is come up with all your requirements. So what things have to be true, step by step. Then simplify the requirements, so remove some steps. Then delete unnecessary steps. Then optimize further. And then finally accelerate the frequency of going through it. And then you can automate the whole thing. But you shouldn't automate anything until you've gone through the distillation of what the steps are. And that happens before training. So for me, it's like I'm puppying, I have an MVP, I come up with the first version, do that Elon Musk thing I just said, and then you put it into a documentation, which is like my Notion style doc, which is the 4 C's. Again, steps, the cadence, how often it happens, and then the checklist with a video of how to do it. Then you give it to somebody, and then you train them on it. So PPT is the training. And then after the training, then what you do is you then hold them accountable. So what I do is when I was in my 20s, I used to see people screwing up and not doing things I thought they were supposed to do. And over the last 10 years, I have come to this very clear realization that what I think is obvious is not obvious.
Yeah.
And the only way to create repeated behavioral outputs from my team is to document what I think is obvious and then to manage them to that standard. Because the problem is I used to go to people and when I saw them screwing up, I would blast them. I'd be like, what the fuck, dude? Like, why aren't you doing this? And it turns out my mentor at the time said to me, like, have you considered they don't know what to do? And I was like, no, they know. Like, they're not that stupid, you know? And it just turns out it wasn't an intelligence thing. It was a discernment judgment thing, which is different than intelligence. And I didn't know that. And so now what I do is once I do the PPTP, puppy process training people, I manage people back to, okay, is the first breakdown is there a process? If there's no process, put a process in place. The second one is the process sufficient? Is it complete? And if it's not, then the constraint is the process. The third one is the training. Is the training good enough to explain the process? And if it's not, then the constraint is the training. And then you only blame the person when all of the other threes are deconstrained. And that has saved me so much bullshit in terms of like blasting people for no reason. Because it usually comes back to me, you know?
Yeah, I like that. I think I have a very, very similar sort of model inside our leadership team as well. And like something that I tell like my entire leadership team all the time is whenever an issue comes up, there could only be 2 reasons. It's either a process issue or is it a people issue, right? As the leadership team, you want to make sure that it's not going to be a process issue. So that means that you make sure you want to have like everything in place, right? Coming from like making sure we have every system processes, making sure they optimize, make sure they're simplified. If somebody was to, like read like an SOP and they just leave confused, they just don't know what to do, right? Then that's not the person that we hire problem. It's the process problem, right? Make sure you go there, you improve it, you optimize it, whatever you're going to do. And then let's say you go through a bunch of like trials and errors and then like everybody's doing it and then they all, like get, like good output from it, except for one person. That's when, that's not a process issue. That once that's the person's issue.
And I think that where this gets very confusing for new entrepreneurs is that there's a orders of operations thing that
Yep.
is actually the difficult part. And I think the reason frameworks like the, I think you said 10-80-10 rule, and
Yep.
then the 1-3-1 rule, which is another one that Dan comes up with, or my PPTP or whatever, these frameworks, they're meant to distill actionable steps that you can take to orient all other judgment. And
Yeah.
the reason I think that's important is because I think the hardest thing in business is just making the right decision at the right time. And it's what's strange is that I don't think it's like always logical
Yeah.
because one piece of advice might be appropriate for one stage of business, but be different for a different stage of business.
Yeah.
And somebody said something very useful to me, which I'm sure I've said too many times on this podcast, but it's this concept of leverage, which is like everyone hears about the points of leverage, which is like money, obviously called capital, human capital, which is people, there's technology, and then there's content. And I think there's also audience. And so those are the entrepreneurial levers that you can have. But somebody said something, which I think it was what's his name? I always forget this guy's name. But anyways, a famous billionaire guy said there's actually a sixth point of leverage, which is the most important, because that point of leverage actually determines when to use every other point of leverage. And that sixth point of leverage is actually discernment and judgment. Because if you use, so what it means is, if let's say like we're just getting started, like for example, ReviOps, my company. Right now, I am self-funding my startup ReviOps. We spend about $50,000 a month from agency profits going back into the technology development. And there's a question of like, okay, I'm using my capital to do that, right? But the question is that if I was like every other Silicon Valley type of tech startup, the cool thing to do is go raise a round, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the points of judgment, it's a decision to make, is do I keep paying out of my own pocket or do I raise a round? Now, the answer to that is, well, it depends, right? And the ability to determine whether you take path A, venture capital, or path B, keep on just doing what I'm doing, is a question of, is it right or is it wrong? And that is discernment. So another example is when something that comes up a lot with my students on GTM agencies is, when do I make my first GTM hire, right? You kind of made a good point, is like, should I hire a GTM agency, a GTM engineer immediately for my new agency? Do I do it all myself? How many clients can I take? Once I have a certain amount of clients, what is too much, and how should I split my time with sales and client fulfillment? And when I hire that person, how much training should I give them? How many processes and playbooks should I put in play? Right? These are all kind of subtle decisions that someone has to make. And the answer is, the answer to all those questions is it depends. It depends upon all these other subtle factors. And the only way to truly know what is right or wrong is discernment. It's a point of judgment. And the reason I love like principles like Dan Martell's 10-80-10 or 1-3-1 or PPTP is because it helps entrepreneurs distill sometimes not obvious decisions into a framework that allows decision making to be easier. And for me, I think like off of everything I just said, I think it's very important that everyone knows, being a startup founder below say 20K MRR, you got to be the chef, the janitor, the kitchen maid. I mean, it's just, there's nobody coming to save you. There's no manager that you're going to hire. There's no GTM guy that's going to save your world. And so you just got to become a jack of all trades until you can document the processes and put them in place. And then only once you have some real clear proof that you can delegate, then you can start to do that. And I think anybody, since we've been plugging Dan, read this book. This is just like a really good framework. I'm not going to unpack all of his ideas, but he has a whole way of thinking about like, when do you delegate? Who should you delegate to? What task is worth delegating? So I'm not going to rip off him. That's the book to go look at. So
I like that. Yeah. Just to add on to that too, like, to be honest, like, in the early stage of our agency, I was really like curious on like what are other people doing, right? I was curious on like what is, like some other big guys at agency doing, how do they operate and things like that. And as soon as I found out, you know what my conclusion is?
Mm,
Everyone operates differently. There's
mm,
no magic bullet, right?
mm-hmm,
So it really ups to you, really.
mm-hmm,
Like only you asking the question like how many clients can like my GTM engineer handle? I don't know. How many clients can you handle?
mm-hmm,
For me, when I get to like I guess like 7 or 8 clients, right? I think that was in the beginning. That was when I start to feel like a little bit overwhelming. That's when I start to notice that my quality of service might drop, maybe my communication, like might be off here and there. So I think that's when I realized that like 7 or 8 clients is like the sweet spot for our agency, right? But for somebody else, it could might be like 20 clients, right? Maybe because the way they operate is they cut most of the communication. They only talk to the client through email, so that allows them to maybe handle more clients. They can charge less, that kind of stuff, right? So there's no right or wrong really, depending on what you want to do, right? For me, I like meeting with customer. I like to collaborate. Then maybe I would lower my number of clients, but charge a little bit more. For some people that just want to do GTM, it's totally fine, right? So build the business or like build the agency around what you want to do. And obviously, I think you mentioned it a few times already, but like hiring like a GTM engineer is not gonna save your business, right?
mm-hmm,
Do it yourself first, whatever works, replicate the system, and then have somebody who can like run that system for you.
mm-hmm. And I think that is the core of like what is the role of the founder? And for me, the
Yeah,
role of the founder is you have to come up with the vision. Well, what is the vision? The vision is the larger term journey and path that you believe you're going on to accomplish some end result.
yeah,
But the next step below that vision is what is the operating system, the framework, which includes all of the checklists and playbooks and things that go into operating the actual business
yeah.
that matter. And that's a combination of what people do you need, how much do you pay those people, what kind of tasks and responsibilities do they take on, what exactly are your systems, how do you move the data around. So
Yeah,
there's a layered concoction of process and playbooks and people and technology that come into kind of like a little machine that helps you run your world. But I
that's right.
think to your point, it's like because now that I've seen into all these different agencies, new ones, old ones, big ones, small ones, medium-sized ones, man, there is just no blueprint. I mean,
Yeah,
it's everybody's different. And honestly, like if I'm being real, I think 90% of them don't know what they're doing. And I think the reason I say that is that what I have seen in the market for GTM agency owners, and this is
yeah,
I think you are an exception, not the rule, which is you are very process focused. I think there's many big, well-known agency owners that you probably all know and follow that have very poor processes. And the reason that they succeed, the reason they have a business is because they're exceptionally good at selling and brand building. And
yeah.
so it's kind of like this sounds fucked up to say, but I'm going to say it because I'm truth seeking, which is they're a Ponzi scheme. They're a Ponzi scheme. And so what that means is that they have such a good brand and they can
Yeah.
show like results for some clients, and they use those outlier results to then bring in the new kind of sheep that like
Yeah.
don't know yet, and they'll sell anybody and everybody. They'll then go and blast through their TAM, get them really great results for about 3 months, and then the whole thing dies at some point. Or they'll take somebody on, they don't get results, and then they churn. But they're
Yeah.
okay with the churn because they have, where maybe they lost 4 this month, they have another 7 or 8 coming on behind them. So
Yeah.
it's like the business is actually growing.
Yeah.
And, or maybe that's not a perfect example, but maybe there's 12 behind them and there's 4 that churn, whatever.
Yeah.
So they're okay. Their whole business model, I'm using the word Ponzi scheme, but it's basically like the last guy in loses, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I like one of my core values is unimpeachable character and providing value. And for me, I couldn't build my agency like that because although I'm extremely, this sounds arrogant to say, but good at sales, I just refuse to use that to promote something I know that is ultimately net negative for the person
Yeah.
I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
And so the only way to counterbalance that is to make good strategic decisions about who do you serve, who can you actually get value from,
Yeah.
is
Who can you
the
help
product or
really?
who do you help, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's where it's confusing for new people coming into the space because they see these kind of big thinkers, these influencers out in the world,
Mm.
and they look at them as a model, and they're really good at tactical clay builds, and they're really good
Yeah.
at, some of the like systems thinking of like use these systems to do this thing. But when it
Yeah.
comes to actually the strategy part of the business or building the business itself,
Yeah.
nobody talks about that.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of left to their own devices, and then they get kind of shitty advice, probably in back channels from the wrong people. And then they build
Yeah.
what I call the yo-yo effect, where they grow to
Yeah.
10 and then they collapse, and then grow to 10 and then collapse. So,
Yeah.
anyways, how do you think I'm off there? Do you think I'm being overly harsh, or what's your take?
No, man, I make it like I'm with you, and like just being in the space for a couple of years now. Like I just like yourself, I got a chance to look into like, a couple agency, how they operate and things like that. And man, oh man, like there are all agencies out there who like the founders, so they know nothing about like GTM. They know nothing about like literally anything, right? All they're good at is sales and like branding, like you say, right? Um, and to be honest, like from what I've heard, like they're not really doing well. And if you're like starting out like as an agency, like you don't want to be like those kind of like founders, really, right? I've done a lot of consultations with like people, and people ask me like a bunch of questions, like different like variety of like topic all the time, right? Sometimes people ask me about deliverability. Sometimes people ask me about strategy. Sometimes people ask me about copywriting. Sometimes people like yourself ask me about like system, the way it operates, the way I run my team cultures and things like that. And I can tell you that I can literally give you like insight to every single aspect from like the agency world, right? You want to be that person. You don't have to, like do everything yourself. And this is why, again, recommended to read Dan Mattel book on like delegating. But at the very least, you just want to make sure that you know a little bit of everything. You make sure that you know what works and what doesn't, and then have somebody run that system for you to free yourself to move on to essentially build out the next thing, the next system in your agency, basically, right? And if you don't want to get into GTM, you want to move faster, have a co-founder. I think that's pretty much the solution, right? And I think that's why most like business got two founders, because one person usually work on like growing the business, working on the front end, and we got another founder work on like, the operation, the back end side of things, right? So yeah, depending on like where your taste is, if you want to like split 50-50, you want to kind of like share the success, then get a co-founder. But just hiring like a GTM engineer, paying them like $1,000 per month, it's not going to save the agency.
Yeah, no doubt. I have some dark war stories on business partners, and I'm going to put a big asterisk on the advice for business partner is
Yeah.
if you find the right person, it is the best thing that ever happened to you. If you find the wrong person, it is the worst thing that ever happened to you. And so can say my first three businesses, I was screwed over by business partners. But I think also be wary of who you give access to your business, especially on the equity side.
Yeah.
My big thing in the tech world, for anyone who hasn't had business partners before,
Yeah.
typically there's a vesting period on equity. Typically there's like a 1 year cliff where they won't even vest into any equity, which means vesting means like if you have a C corp, you have a cap table, which is a capitalization table. It's a way of distributing shares. And essentially, let's say you have 1 million shares outstanding, and let's say I own 800,000, so I own 80% of the business, and the rest of the table owns the remaining 200,000.
Yeah.
That's how the equity is distributed. But the problem is that when you're issuing stock, there's something called options, and so you don't just give actual stock or shares. You give options to the employees, and those options vest into time, which means vesting means like people have to wait for them. And what I
Yeah.
see a lot of new entrepreneurs do is just go like, oh, new founder, let me give you 50% of my business. And I've made that mistake, I'm ashamed to admit, where it's like, here's 50% of the business. Let's sign it into paper. They own the actual shares and stock immediately. And then
Yeah.
the guy just doesn't work. And you're like,
shoot.
well, why are you not working? And it's like, oh man, like I just
Yeah.
wanted to go to the beach today, or like,
Yeah.
I just decided I'm actually gonna take this other side project, but like, dude, I'll be here for you.
Yeah.
And the problem is now, especially if you're 50-50, there's something called an operating agreement for a company. And every time you form an LLC or a C corp, you typically, like especially with S corps, which is kind of normal if you're not doing I would suggest doing an LLC conversion to an S corp.
Okay.
In like a state like Wyoming. Wyoming's the easiest. I've started in Texas. Delaware is kind of a pain in the butt, but if you're getting into SaaS, that's
Interesting.
probably a requirement. But my point is like, be very wary of giving up equity and make sure that your operating agreement has an escape clause,
Yeah.
because you can easily get into a situation where if you use the boilerplate one from Zoom, LegalZoom,
Yeah.
I know because I made this mistake, is you end up where literally if you go 50-50, the only way to dissolve the agreement is joint agreement from the partners. And so you are stuck in a legal entity where you can't
Yeah.
compete against yourself. So you can't leave and start another thing. He could sue you, or she could sue you.
Yeah.
And there's no way to get out of it. So make sure there's an escape clause. Never go 50-50. Somebody should always be kind of the king of the castle.
Yeah.
Have a vesting period. And for typically it's like a 1-year cliff, which means they have to wait 1 year. And then there's usually a pro rata vesting, which means every month there's additional equity, which means
Yeah.
equal shares for the remaining amount of the term over 4 years. This way,
Yeah.
if the guy leaves in the first 12 months, he gets nothing. If the
Yeah.
guy, or if you kick him out in the first 12 months, he gets nothing. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
Same thing with if it goes, say, 18 months. Well, he gets a year in say, 6 months. But then if he leaves or you fire him, he doesn't vest in any additional
Yeah.
equity. So key things to be aware of for anybody who's trying to get into that.
Yeah.
Have you ever had
No,
trouble like that?
No, I'm not like the expert on like how to structure like the share and things like that with the co-founders. And I think it is a lot more relevant in the software world where there's like equity and things like that. But agency itself is like more like a cash flow business. So luckily, I was able to have my co-founder since the beginning of time, so I don't have to bring somebody else, like along the way, like midway through my agency journey and things like that, right? But what I'll leave with this topic is this. Number one, it's always like being in a relationship, right? You start dating somebody, right? The first few months, you're gonna see this person as an angel, right? And I'm talking about like 5-6 months, right? That sounds long, but like that's the period when you're gonna be like, oh man, like this is a great co-founder, like this guy's amazing, blah blah, all that kind of stuff, right? But eventually, like when times go after 1 year, after 2 years, like after maybe some like I guess like downhill, some bad months, I think this is where the true color comes in. Right. So yeah, I think to your point, like you probably should not give anybody like half your business like right up front if you if you're in the market looking for a co-founder like in the middle of like your agency journey building. But if you don't want to go with a co-founder, you just hire like an executive, right? Just pay them more. That way you can fire them anytime you want, pay them a little bit more. You'd have to worry about equity.
I agree. And I think also for me, like before even business partnership equity conversations come into play,
Yeah.
do a 3 to 6 month trial with the person. And to your
Exactly.
point, pay them a premium, pay them more than their typical amount, if you can afford it, of course. And the reason you do that is because my experience has been the first 2 months, 3 months is just the honeymoon. Now, if they do not perform within the first month or two and there's weird stuff happening,
Yeah.
cut them immediately. It's just like,
Yeah.
it will only get worse. But let's say it goes great. I've had people do amazing for 6 months, and then all of a sudden some weird thing pops off, and you're like, "Whoa, where did that come from?"
Yeah.
So my rule is, if I haven't worked with somebody for at least a year,
Yeah.
I don't completely trust them, and that's just hard earned. And the problem is that like I'm a very trusting, open. I want to love people, and so I usually give people too much trust, but it has
Yeah.
burned me deeply. And so that's my rule is like always do trials, always have like a period where you say, look, this is a test. For the next
Yeah.
3 months, we're on a test. We're on the next 3 months, we're on a probationary period. And
Yeah.
then finally, maybe I'll offer you some equity at the end of that, but maybe I won't.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do, especially when you're trying to attract top talent, but it's
Yeah.
necessary. There's one other thing I want
I
to
like
add
that.
to this, which is like everybody you see as a expert in this space has probably only been in the space for no more than 3 to 5 years. And maybe a little bit longer, like the super, super duper OGs, but like these super OGs are like 4 to 5 years into the space that I have
Yeah.
met. And the people that are on like the top of Instantly's expert page and the people who are on the top of Smartly's expert page, they've been only around for a year and a half, a couple of years. And I can tell you, because I know them all,
Yeah.
that most of them are just figuring it out like you guys are, who are listening, not you, but like people out there in the world listening to this podcast. So I just want to pop that bubble that there is some like genre of true gods. Like I keep hearing people talk about, like Eric Nowalski and all these other guys. And I like Eric, but it's like, he's just figuring it out too. He's a few years ahead of you. He has a lot of experience. He's very knowledgeable. He knows a lot of stuff. But don't believe that everybody has it figured out just because you see them on LinkedIn. Me too, right? Every week I am learning something new. But I would also say that there are like the people that have enough experience, but then there's a whole dark side of the equation too, where there are people that claim to have experience, but they talk a good game. They can build a great clay table. Just because those guys say they can do it, don't believe them until they've done it a bunch with
Yeah.
you.
And you know what? That's a really good point. And I think this is where if you start, I guess, like building out like system processes and things like that, it kind of tied to that too. Like when it comes to like quote unquote figuring things out, to be honest, like we're in the space, especially with like AI and stuff like that coming in, there are things that you just have to constantly figuring out. Like there's no like end goal to it, right? There's always some sort of like, I guess, like constant battle to it, right? So I'll give you an example. For ad agency, right? They always face some kind of like Facebook policy change, right? YouTube, Instagram policy change, right? So they cannot really systemize around that, right? For cold email, there's deliverability, right? Even Eric said the same thing too, right? His advice from what to do, how to manage deliverability from like 6 months ago is not the same as the same advice he would give him today, right? So don't be so obsessed with, I guess, like systemize everything, right? I kind of take back to the previous conversation. Like there are just things that you cannot systemize. There's just things that are constantly changing. There are things that people might have said like, like 6 months, 1 year ago that is not necessarily true anymore. There are just things that you might just have to go out there and just learn what works for yourself, really.
It's 100% true. And I would say that I think there is this real yearning
Yeah.
for humans to believe there is a Messiah-like character who's going to come in and hold them and cuddle them and love them
Right.
and tell them that everything will be okay.
Yeah.
Me included. Where it's like, I wish there was somebody who just gave me the world. And the truth is that no matter how good Dan Martell is or Alex Hermosi is or
Yeah.
Eric is or I am or you are, it doesn't really ultimately matter because the devil's in the details. Like we talked about, everybody has their own little flavor of doing things. And in my experience in building many businesses at this point is that the intellectual property of figuring out that machine, that system, is the core of what makes the business valuable. And just to put like a real point on this, and I've said this on prior podcasts, is we asked my old business partner was at something called Sarah Week, which is an international oil and gas conference that happens every year in Houston.
Okay.
And he met the founder of Waze there, the
Wow.
GPS application, Israeli founder.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it's like, how can this small Israeli startup come in and disrupt Google Maps and Apple Maps? It's like a really interesting question. And you even think like, well, and how do they have even any moat of like what works and doesn't work, right? Because anybody can come in and compete. And the answer to his question stuck with us, which was, and me in particular, which was, anyone can come in and copy our user interface at any time. Anybody can try to like come up with, competitive features and functions, but they don't know where we're going next. And the reason they don't know where we're going next is because they haven't been in the conversation internally to discuss the constraints and the problems and the edge cases.
Right.
And so the actual like value of any business is that mind share, that understanding of
Yeah.
all the little like tears in the fabric of reality
Yeah.
that allow you to make a good decision, which again, judgment, to the next little pivot.
Yeah.
And so that's why Waze was always 6 months ahead of the competition, because the
Yeah.
competition was just watching Waze and going, okay, we're going to add there's a police car there button. But Waze was like, no, but the next little thing is here. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
Apple's going in this direction, and Waze is now going this way. No pun
Yeah.
intended. And so they were always ahead. And I think the same thing happens with the cold email or outbound or GTM space, is that everyone's like, oh, what did Eric say? Or what did Jesse say? Or what did
Yeah.
name a guru guy say? And they're telling you that because it worked for them for the last 2-3 months, but
Yeah.
something else is they're actively doing that they're not sharing with you because that's their secret sauce is actually what's giving them the competitive advantage.
Yeah.
So that's why for me, it's like, I want to just completely eliminate in somebody's mind this need to rely on the guru, because the best way to do it is learn the basics, learn how to use some basic clay workflows, use how to work on instantly. Once you understand the basic system, go through a course. I have a course, go into a school course if you want. I'll put the link below. Once you learn that, it's all iteration. It's all learning, right?
I'm with you. Let me actually tell you the reason why we are, in my honest opinion, as successful as we are now is because we actually don't copy the same playbook that everyone else is doing, right? We are where we are now, seven figures agency, that kind of stuff, is because of the culture and because of the team members that we brought in, right? That is like the complete opposite playbook that we have. So somebody was telling me the other day something about like, you are your niche, basically, right? You're trying to copy everyone else, like no one's gonna listen to you, right? So I think for the longest time, like this is how I think about like LinkedIn content, the way I want to position my agency, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. I try to follow everyone else's playbook, right? I try to write LinkedIn posts. I try to like talk about, things like what Eric's saying. Like I think talk about strategy. I talk about like best practices, and then I try to copy other agency, talk about GTM tools and things like that. Hasn't been working for me at all, right? And then I think there was like a aha moment in my head when I started thinking about like, man, like what is it that I am good at? Like what is something that I can just really double down on? Not everyone's doing it. And really it comes down to two things that it helps our agency has been, like working up to this point. So the first thing is system, right? That we've been like most of the podcast talking about. I was so obsessed with building the system. I was so obsessed with making sure the customer is happy, the customer service, the onboarding, the fulfillment. What if thing doesn't work out? What do we do? That kind of stuff. And the second one is really team culture, right? I think from like for me, like a little backstory as like, because I was an employee before I'm a founder. So I've been through multiple like companies, been through multiple manager. I know exactly what makes a good leader. I know exactly what makes a shitty leader, right? And I try to be that person, right? So the way that we do things here is we have a culture of employee first, right? We take care of our team, that kind of stuff. And because of that, like our team is, like becoming like the superstar GTM in the space, right? So that now I can like take a step away, just focus on our branding and things like that. And really like all my clients are taken care of, and look at all of our case studies, like most of them is not coming out from me. Most of them coming out from just simply my team, right? So it's the fact that I realize, hey, my strong suite, my niche really is in the team culture. My niche is to build a team that can actually work and being cohesive as a team, right? And I just double down on it, and that's the core reason why Cymate become where we are today as an agency. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think that what happens with content is like people saw Cold IQ
Yeah.
If anyone doesn't know Cold IQ, they're a relatively large outbound agency
Yeah.
that really mastered LinkedIn organic content about 2
Exactly.
years ago. And they led the path to the types of posts to create, and all their founders essentially had their own personal brands, and then they had all of their employees create their own personal brands. And I'm going to admit, I copied them too.
Yeah.
Where it was like, okay, I'm going to have all my freaking employees now posting, and we're going to all share our
Right.
content to the main company page. So I took a
Right.
page out of their playbook. But here's the thing, is that will work. And the reason they worked for them is because they were the first to do it. And
Yeah,
then maybe
exactly.
a few others then did it, and it worked for them too. But at some point, everybody and their brother starts sharing these like
doing it.
long flow diagrams of like, this is how you connect instantly to Clay. And it's like,
Yeah.
we all look the same. And the key, there's like, the whole purple cow thing, the marketing book. It's like,
Yeah.
you got to stand out, man. It's like,
You have to.
if you're going to
Yep.
just copy everybody else's strategy, you're going to get everyone else's results.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like, I don't know if it was Adam Robinson said this, but somebody said this. Maybe he's regurgitating what other people said, but it's this idea
Yeah.
of you want to find your, I don't know if there was the word like epic zone or something, but it
Yeah,
was like
your
this
niche,
idea.
really. Yeah.
It's like, you don't want to be so crazy in your content that you're just like polarizing, you're a dick. And you also don't want to be boring. So it's like, I'm just
Yeah.
like everybody else. Here's my cliche like workflow
Yeah.
diagram. So you want to be somewhere kind of like in the middle, where it's like you're saying controversial takes that are true to you, that represent your core values, and you take a stand, but
Yeah.
they're not so vanilla and boring that nobody wants to listen.
Exactly.
And
It has to be something new, a little bit interesting that people haven't heard before. It's not the same post. Like, this is the top 5 tool. Oh, I'm guilty of making those kind of posts.
Me too.
If you see it a million times, then you're just gonna have sick of it.
Yeah, and so for me, it's like when the core content strategy is simple for me, which is like,
Yeah.
one, it niching down allows for better content. And the reason
Yeah.
I say to all agencies, my personal belief is like, yes, you can build a horizontal agency, which means takes on a bunch of different TAM
Yeah.
or ideal customer profiles. But for me, the actual way to like create amazing content is to choose one vertical in one market, or 2 or 3 verticals and markets that are related to
Yeah.
each other, and they have a similar ICPs. And then what you do is you build all of your content, all your lists, all your systems around those people, and then you can have strong opinions on a particular vertical.
Yeah.
For me, like my content strategy is I serve GTM agency owners. I talk to GTM agency owners. I produce software GTM agency owners. That's
Yeah.
my beachhead market. So it's like I say things that are controversial. For example, and we should get into this real quick, which is I believe vibe coding is crazy, and people around me disagree, which is fine. But it's a worthy debate. It doesn't make me wrong and them right, or them right and me wrong. It just means there's a debate worth having. So likewise, like I tell people, like Supabase is a horrible option for your GTM database, and that pisses off a lot of people that are super into like MacGyvering their solution. And so, but it's also a worthy debate because there's actual legitimate points I'm making. But so and I think what happens with people's content is they just follow everyone else. They become very vanilla, and they feel good that they're doing something that feels like content marketing because it seems like that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And the truth is, it's like you're doing it to generate a result. So if your content is not generating the result, then change it. And what I found was my content was like I'll just give a very like quick 20-second overview. Is I didn't really get deep into LinkedIn content until this time last year. And I had at the time like 7,000 followers or 6,000 followers. And they're almost all in the oil and gas space. And I decided I was going to start doing content. And I didn't know how to start. And so I just started randomly posting around random shit. And I hired this guy who had 500,000 followers, and I paid him $1,200. And he told me to like create all this, like basically look up on Clio at the time, which was a tool to find viral posts, steal the image essentially, and then rewrite the copy and then just follow the trend. And I started doing that. And I also came up with this lead bait system that I have a whole course on in my school group. And I actually, according to Trigify, I was like one of the most engaged per capita like lead gen category guys in the world from like February through like April of last year or this year.
Yeah.
And here's what I learned. Nobody would buy my shit. They were not my ideal customer profile.
Yeah.
They did not generate good leads for me. I ended up having to just like give people a bunch of free shit through lead baits because people would be like, DM, like, you know, commenting. Because like the whole way lead baits work is like, hey guys, I'm going to give you this thing, comment below. So I'd have generic stuff like, I built my business to $10 million. If you want my frameworks, go ahead and comment course below and I'll send you exactly how I did it. And then we would get 2,000 comments on a post. I would spend my entire Saturday, literally, like with my VA going, like just responding to people. And it just didn't move the needle financially, but it felt good. It felt like a little like influencer.
A little superstar,
And so then what happened was I then decided to pivot into like, okay, I'm going to be very niche around how systems and operations for agencies is important. And nobody gave a shit. Like it was like for about 4 months, people didn't care. And I was getting like 10 to 12, this is around like June, July, 10 to 12 likes per post. And then in the last 2 months, I pivoted strong into GTM agency owners or how to grow your GTM agency and why you're failing. And all of a sudden, now that I'm doing that, I'm getting 50 to 100 likes per post. And so it goes to show like you don't have to start in the perfect place, but engagement isn't always great. Just find your niche, find what people like want to hear about, and then double down it, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I'm on the same boat as you, right? So I try to copy Core IQ's playbook, right? Doing those like lead magnets, like comment and I'll share you my top secret that make it works for me. Tons of comment, tons of posts, but didn't go anywhere, right? Then we sort of like after doing like a bunch of like content iterations and things like that, it's kind of really make us double down on the fact that we're going to be using LinkedIn to really attracting new talents, right? Better talent in the space, showing off what you can get out of by working with a company, right? So Code IQ playbook is like posting, you know, like tools, content, position themselves as like the market leader when it comes to maybe like system, GTM and things like that. For us, it would be like, hey, look at how great our team culture is. Look how exciting it is to work with our team, right? And because of that, our team performed pretty well. So when you work with us, right, you can rest assured that our team was taking good care of you, right? So that has becoming like a shifting point where I think about like content recently. And yeah, that's our playbook. And if, you know, like you trying to copy our playbook, you might make it work, but you might not. If that's not really something you're into, then, you know, maybe rethink about what your strong suit is, right? Think about like what is your niche, what makes you successful. And really, you don't really know until like you just try a bunch of stuff, right? But once you find that like North Star, just run away with it.
And I think also like remember that everyone's figuring it out. Like even as I just said, I'm getting more engagement for this new kind of offer. The truth is like first off, I'm talking about my software company, RevyOps.com, which focuses on GTM agency owners. So I just want to be clear. That's not like I wouldn't copy me because I am having success with that niche because I'm selling a different product and service than a GTM agency. But even if you were trying to copy me, I don't necessarily even know if that's the right play because I'm testing it. But this goes to show that like I'm reading Magnetic Marketing by Dan Kennedy. So if anybody doesn't know, Dan Kennedy is basically the guru behind Russell Brunson, Alex Hormozy, and he came off of like all the like old school copywriters back in the 60s and 70s. So he's kind of a funneling force for a lot of the modern marketing motions. And if you read the book, Magnetic Marketing, the first thing he says, the way he starts the book is if you do not have a bunch of essentially what Russell Brunson would call hungry buyers, but basically if you don't have a big audience of people that want to buy your shit, then it doesn't really matter how good your marketing is, you know? And one thing that I will say with RevyOps is like my beachhead market is GTM agency owners. But let's be real. It's like a relatively small niche. There's probably only 2,000 of us in the world. And maybe like on the small kind of consultant size, it goes up to like 5 or 10,000, depending upon your definition of a GTM agency. But it's not very big. And in full disclosure, it's not very rich. Many of these guys do not have a lot of money. And they tend to like to build shit themselves. Let's sup a base Airtable this thing, you know, with a lovable front end. Even though it won't work, I'm battling that kind of objection. So So there's a question, like I'm now just speaking from first principles as a marketer, and I'm using myself as an example of like even someone like me, like might be giving you advice that's predicated on a false assumption.
Yeah.
And that's why I just think like the key thing is discernment. It just remember all your idols are human, all your
Yeah.
gurus bleed, and we're all flawed in our judgment.
Yeah.
And so I just really believe that like find your own path, make your own
Yeah.
judgment, and use frameworks from like Dan Martell's and the Dan
Yeah.
Kennedy's and all those other
Yeah.
people. So
Exactly, exactly. There's one biggest takeaway from the podcast or this episode is, from what I'm looking into different agency, from you yourself looking at different agency, everybody operate differently, right? And whatever works for you, just stick with it, run away with it. It will work regardless if you just stick with it for so long and just make the right decisions that is cater around what you are good at, basically.
and I'm going to take a moment just to plug the fact that I actually happen to have an entire course on how to scale your GTM agency with I literally give away my entire agency structure. I will say I'm biased that I do feel like I built something that actually is repeatable and it is the correct way to do it because I've done it
Yeah.
2 times
Yeah.
before and they're both past $1 million in annual revenue.
Yeah.
So like I would say anybody who is like, but Ben, like I want some help, go to my school community. You can sign up. It's $5 per month. If you DM me, I will give you access
Yeah.
to some of the free materials. And then we also, if you sign up with ReviOps, we give you all of that course material absolutely for free, and we'll help you scale your agency. So that's my
Yeah.
offer. So there are people that can help you. I'm not trying to just leave people like blind and helpless in the desert here,
Yeah.
but just also have an open mind, including for any content you digest from me as well.
Right, right. Well, you know what? I'll give you another plug too. I did get a chance to check out your course, and some of the contents are actually very good.
Thank you.
Yes, like you should, like go over your niche, but really, there are like you're running a business, running an agency in general. There's just like a million micro things, right? So there's no way that you can really like figure everything else yourself, right? How to run a sales team, right? How to do finance, right? How to document, how to write SOPs, like those are like the little admin stuff that really you could perhaps copy from somebody else, you know. And I would recommend to go with band course because I've got a chance to take a look at it. Some of the materials are very solid. So there you go.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. And also, anybody who's a GTM agency owner, we have a new Slack channel. It's completely free. It's called Next Gen GTM. It's where GTM agency owners come for a safe place to learn, grow, and communicate with other GTM agency owners about problems like we're talking about on this call. We meet Thursdays. That's free as well. You can come in and we just talk shop. And so if you want to network, send me a DM on LinkedIn. And then also you can, it's just Benjamin Aaron Reed or Benjamin Reed. And then obviously ben@reviops.com. Also, where can everyone find you? Where do they find you online? Where do they find you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, you find me on LinkedIn at I believe slash Wes Hoang, so my first and last name. Yeah, you can just send me an email, wesleyh@cymate.io. Happy to give you perhaps like any kind of like advice you need. Yeah, give you some pointers if you are growing your agency journey. Happy to give you my 2 cents on where you are.
Cool. Well, anybody, there's going to be links in the show notes below. So if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify or whatever, I'm going to make sure that Wesley has his links to his website as well as to his LinkedIn profile there. So if you need to communicate with him, please reach out. This is all about communication and growing and community. So it sounds like Wesley would love to learn from you as well. So last thing I always ask everyone before we wrap it up, and this is my favorite question, is it doesn't have to be business. It could be about anything in life.
Yeah.
If you had to give one parting word to humanity listening in 100 years from now to this podcast, or whatever, people out there in Earth today, what would you want people to know? What is your message to the world?
Oh man. Okay, I got
I
some
put people
time
on
to think about it because there's
I
just
love
so
to put
many
people on the
things.
spot.
There's so many things, and it just one thing. Oh man.
Yeah,
Okay.
no pressure.
I think I've had some thought recently, and it just kind of makes me just like a lot happier in life in general, a lot happier as like a business owner, like a lot like less stress. But I'm trying to think how can I phrase this? Give me a second.
It can be a story too. It doesn't have to be. I mean, it doesn't have to be short. So if like I still have some time. So if you want to like give us a backstory or something, there's no
Yeah.
right way here.
Okay. I think you can find a lot of joy and just like enjoyment in general in life by just really focus your energy on like helping other people, really, right? So for me, the ways that I like to sort of like think about like where do I want to go in life is that since I was a kid, my biggest, I guess, like wish, dream, I guess, like goal in life is not to make a lot of money, but to actually find a right partner, right? And I think with my fiance right now, I know that I found the right partner already. I think that to me is like more important than like money or like having like successful agency or whatever it might be, right? Same thing for my agency, right? There's a lot of like, if you're running like a sort of like a service type of company kind of agency, you know that there's a lot of like stress coming from like dealing with client, right? Your revenue, your profit, optimizing how to make it work, new AI tool, whatever it might be. But I like to spend my focus and my energy on taking care of my team members, right? Making sure that these guys are out there in the trenches, like dealing with clients on a day-to-day basis, right? I need to make sure that at the very least they are taken care of when it comes to financially, making sure that I build like a good team culture, a good workplace, just seeing everybody, like go out there, be in the trenches, and then just kind of like huddle at the end of the week and just kind of share their war story, just having some good laugh, that kind of stuff. I think that itself makes running a business a lot more fun and a lot easier. So if I were to give just one advice, I would say, like focus your time, your energy on, like helping other people or not on like money and things like that.
Yeah, that's great. One of the core, I would say I did not grow up religious, and I don't consider myself to be religious right now. I would say I do consider myself to be more and more spiritual.
Yeah.
And I find that the less I have focused on financial gain and have focused more on living life in accordance with values that I believe to be good.
Yeah.
And one of them is helping people, providing value. I have found that life has been easier, and then also strangely enough, things have been happening in my favor
Yeah.
in strange kind of not predictable ways. I would call it not luck, but almost like it almost feels like something's helping me.
Yeah.
And I will say that like in this office right here, I'm in Las Vegas right now, in my home office. And there's a space on the carpet right here. And I think, I don't know, maybe it's like when you do really hard shit and when you try really hard things and you like launching a software business or launching an agency, at least for me, I can say that it has required me to then ask for help from higher powers because I am just like, I feel like I am like limited. And I'm like, so I actually have found myself on my knees here on a regular basis, just asking for help. And I would say that also my number one prayer, again, it is not to any particular thing other than what I could call the universe. Maybe, if that's God for you, that's fine. For me, it is, I ask one thing only. Give me whatever I need to impact the most amount of people positively in this universe.
Yeah. And
that's it.
I love that.
That's it. Because it's like, it might not be ReviOps, and it might not be next gen sales systems, and it might not be this podcast. I don't know what it is, but it's like, for me, there's a great song it's like about the Chinese doctor or the Chinese farmer. So if you like YouTube Chinese farmer song, and the whole song goes like, this guy has something good happen to him, and all his neighbors are like, "Oh, that's so amazing!" And he goes, "We'll see." And then because something went really good, something bad happens, and then everyone's like, "Oh, so sad that happened." He goes, "We'll see." And the whole thing is basically like good or bad. You never know why you're struggling the way you are now or what's going on. And so for me, like the only thing I can control is pursuing life through values I choose.
Exactly.
And trying to do the best that I can.
100%.
That's how I live.
Yeah. Just just like yourself, every single week, I start my week with a little quick prayers. And all I pray every single week is not for more money, not for more revenue, not for more profit. I just ask God, give me strength this week to take good care of my team. I think that's all I ask for.
That's great. That's a great way to end the podcast. With that being said, everyone, wishing you all love and light in your life. And we will see you guys on the next Gen Sales Leaders podcast next time. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you guys again. See you later.
Everyone.